What would you do if the police pulled you over for no reason? What if they humiliated you, forcing you to do push-ups in the freezing cold, just because they could? Monica Hayes never expected her late-night drive home to turn into a nightmare. But when two corrupt officers pushed her too far, they didn't realize she had the power to fight back. What happens when the ones in power finally face consequences? Watch until the end. Like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories.
The night air in Chicago was crisp, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones if you stayed out too long. The streets were eerily quiet, the cityscape blanketed in a thin layer of fresh snow that glistened under the dim streetlights. Monica Hayes exhaled slowly, watching the warmth of her breath fade into the chilly night. She was exhausted. Running a restaurant wasn't a job, it was a way of life, and tonight had been one of those long, draining nights where everything that could go wrong did. Last-minute cancellations, a vendor mix-up, and a short-staffed kitchen had kept her on her feet for over 12 hours. Still, she loved it. Hayes & Co. wasn't just a business, it was a dream she had built from the ground up. Now, at almost 1 a.m., she was finally heading home. Her car, a sleek black BMW X5, glided smoothly through the near-empty streets. The heated seats were a blessing, thawing out the stiffness in her legs as she drove through the city she had called home her entire life. The hum of jazz played softly through her speakers, calming her nerves as she navigated through the snow-dusted roads. Then, out of nowhere, flashing red and blue lights flooded her rearview mirror. Monica's fingers instinctively tightened around the steering wheel. Damn, here we go. She didn't panic, she had been through this before. Not often, but enough. Enough to know that these moments were never just simple traffic stops. She checked her speedometer. 33 in a 35. No sudden stops, no swerving. There was no logical reason for this. Her stomach twisted, but she didn't hesitate. She knew the rules: signal, pull over slowly, keep both hands visible on the wheel, do everything exactly right. Because when you're a black woman pulled over by the police, every movement mattered. She flicked on her blinker and eased onto the shoulder of the road. Her pulse was steady, but her mind was racing. What was this about? A broken taillight, a random stop, or just another excuse to remind her of where they thought she belonged? She cracked her window slightly as the sound of boots crunching against snow reached her ears. Two officers approached her vehicle, one on each side. The first, standing by her driver's window, was a tall, broad-shouldered white man, his build imposing even under the layers of his uniform. His name tag read Sergeant Ryan Porter. His face was unreadable, but his smirk, subtle, condescending, was enough to set her nerves on edge. The second officer, standing a few feet away near the back of her car, was a shorter, blonde woman with piercing blue eyes. Officer Lisa Harrington. Her posture was stiff, her hand resting just a little too comfortably near her belt. Monica knew that look. They weren't here to ask questions. They were here to assert power. License and registration. Porter's voice was flat, emotionless, like this was just another checkbox in his shift. No greeting. No explanation. Monica nodded, moving slowly, deliberately. She reached into her glove compartment, retrieving the documents with smooth, practiced precision before handing them over. As she did, she finally spoke. "Can I ask why I'm being pulled over, officer?" Her voice was calm, level. Porter chuckled. It was a short, amused sound, like she had just asked a stupid question. Harrington, still positioned near the rear of the car, took a slow step forward. "You were driving a little erratic back there," she said. The way she dragged out the word erratic made Monica's stomach tighten. Erratic? Bullshit. Monica's brows knitted together. "I wasn't driving erratically," she said, keeping her tone polite but firm. "I just finished work and was heading home." Porter flipped lazily through her documents. "Where do you work?" she exhaled slowly. This was a game. She knew it. "I own a restaurant downtown." Hayes & Co. That made Porter pause, his gaze lifted from the paperwork, locking onto hers. He smirked again. That right, big shot business owner. There was something in his tone that made her jaw clench. He wasn't impressed. He was amused, like he thought she was playing pretend. Harrington's voice cut in. Step out of the vehicle. Monica's heart skipped a beat. For what? Her mouth went dry. She swallowed hard before speaking, keeping her voice measured. Excuse me. Porter took a step back, motioning with his hand. Step out of the car, ma'am. The word ma'am was laced with something just shy of mockery. Her stomach tightened. This was not normal. This was not routine. For a second, she considered pushing back, asking more questions, demanding a valid reason, but she knew where that road led. She had seen too many stories end the wrong way. So, with controlled movements, she unbuckled her seatbelt and pushed the door open, stepping into the biting cold. The moment the icy air hit her skin, she realized just how bad this could get. Her breath turned to mist, her boots crunched against the snow, and the weight of their eyes on her made her skin crawl. Hands where we can see them, Porter said. She did as she was told, lifting her hands slightly. Her coat wasn't thick enough to fight against the chill, and she could already feel the cold seeping in. Harrington started circling her car, shining her flashlight into the backseat like she was looking for something. You been drinking tonight? Harrington asked casually. Monica clenched her jaw. No. You sure? Her irritation flared. Yes, Porter crossed his arms. Your eyes look a little glassy, maybe you're on something else. A slow, simmering anger built in Monica's chest. Here it was, the moment she had feared. I'm not under anything, she said, keeping her tone even. Harrington took a step closer, her breath visible in the cold air. You're acting a little defensive. That's usually what people do when they have something to hide. Monica exhaled slowly, fighting to keep her temper in check. I have nothing to hide. But they weren't listening. They had already decided how this was going to play out. The street was empty, no witnesses, just her and them. And for the first time that night, a sickening realization settled in her gut. This wasn't about a traffic stop. This was about control, and she had no idea just how far they were willing to take it. The night air was brutal. The moment Monica stepped out of her car, the wind sliced through her coat like it wasn't even there. She sucked in a sharp breath, but it didn't help. The chill burrowed into her bones, stiffening her limbs as she stood on the snow-dusted pavement. She had done everything right. Hands visible, movements slow, voice calm. Yet here she was, standing outside in the middle of the night with two cops looming over her. Sergeant Ryan Porter eyed her like a predator sizing up its prey, arms crossed over his thick chest. Officer Lisa Harrington circled her car, shining her flashlight into the back seat like she expected to find something, anything, to justify this stop. Monica fought to keep her breathing steady. Don't let them see you rattle. Porter smirked. You seem nervous. Monica's jaw clenched. Nervous? Wasn't that the natural response when two cops pulled you over without reason and ordered you out into the freezing cold? Harrington strolled back toward them, nodding slightly as if she and Porter had some unspoken agreement. Yeah, you're acting a little defensive, she said. That's usually what people do when they've got something to hide. There it was, the script, the same tired justification used time and time again to turn innocence into suspicion, compliance into guilt. Monica exhaled slowly, steadying her voice. I have nothing to hide. Porter hummed, feigning contemplation. You mind if we take a look? Mind, of course she minded, but she knew what would happen if she said no. She knew what refusing would turn into. She swallowed hard, trying to keep her voice neutral. You've already checked my paperwork. I haven't done anything wrong. Porter's smirk widened. He enjoyed this. The power. The control. We're just making sure everything checks out. Harrington's voice was too casual, too nonchalant, like she wasn't violating her rights, like she wasn't stripping Monica of any sense of security. Then, without waiting for a response, she grabbed Monica's wrist. Turn around, Harrington said. Monica's pulse skyrocketed. For what? She asked, voice sharper now. Harrington didn't answer. She simply pulled her roughly toward the car. Whoa! Monica stumbled slightly, catching herself against the cold metal of her SUV. Her heart pounded as Harrington's hands ran down her sides, pressing firmly over her coat, patting down her jeans. The humiliation was instant. On the side of the road, in the freezing cold, like she was some kind of criminal. A sharp burst of air left Monica's lungs as cold fingers brushed against her thighs, her pockets, the waistband of her jeans. She gritted her teeth, swallowing back the fire burning in her throat. Harrington finally stepped back. She's clean. Of course she was clean. Monica turned around, crossing her arms over her chest, rubbing warmth back into her fingers. Can I go now? Porter exhaled dramatically, rubbing his chin. You know, I don't like your attitude. Monica stiffened. My attitude? Porter stepped closer, his height making her feel even smaller beneath him. Yeah, you're acting real impatient, real disrespectful. Her stomach twisted. Here it comes. Harrington sighed like she was disappointed. You know, maybe you need a lesson in compliance. Monica blinked. Excuse me, Porter grinned. Drop down and give me 20. For a second, Monica just stood there, convinced she had misheard. What? Harrington folded her arms. Push-ups, right now. A cold, sharp laugh escaped Monica before she could stop it. You can't be serious. Porter tilted his head, eyes gleaming with amusement. You think this is funny? Monica's breath came out hard. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She wanted to say no. She wanted to turn around, get in her car, and leave. But she knew what would happen if she refused. Porter wouldn't let it go. He'd make something up, say she was resisting, say she had been aggressive, say anything he needed to turn her defiance into an arrest. And then what? A night in jail, a record, her fingers curled into fists. What happens if I say no? She asked, voice low. Porter shrugged. Then I say you refused a field sobriety test, we impound the car, maybe even book you for resisting. There it was, the threat, the power play. Monica felt heat rise to her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from pure, burning rage. She wanted to fight. She wanted to tell them both to go to hell. But she had seen too many stories end the wrong way. So, with no other choice, she lowered herself onto the frozen pavement. Her hands met the icy concrete first. The cold was immediate, searing through her skin, biting into her bones. Her knees burned from the harsh surface, her breath sharp and visible in the frigid air. She clenched her jaw, pushing herself down and up, counting in her head. 1, 2. Don't let them see you break. 3, 4. They're waiting for you to snap. Don't give them that. 5, 6. Above her, she heard laughter. Porter whistled. Look at that. She listens. Harrington chuckled. Maybe she's not as entitled as I thought. Monica grit her teeth, her arms trembling against the cold, against the exhaustion, against the sheer disgust crawling under her skin. 10, 11. The snow beneath her palms began to numb her fingertips, sending sharp stabs of pain up her wrists. 15, 16, almost done. 17, 18, her arms shook, her muscles screaming. 19, 20. She pushed herself up one final time, forcing herself not to collapse, not to shiver, not to give them the satisfaction. Slowly she got to her feet, her breath heavy but her gaze locked onto Porter's. He smirked, taking his time before waving a lazy hand. Yeah. Get out of here. Monica didn't say a word. She turned on her heel, walking back to her car, forcing herself to move slowly, steadily. She got in, locked the door. Her fingers were shaking as she gripped the steering wheel. Outside, Porter and Harrington were still watching, their expressions smug, triumphant. Monica swallowed hard, forcing herself to take a deep breath. One last steady breath. Then she pulled off. She didn't look in the rearview mirror. She never wanted to see their faces again. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Monica's hands were still trembling as she gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles turning white from the pressure. The car's heater blasted warm air into the cabin, but it did nothing to thaw the cold that had settled deep in her chest. Her breath was uneven, ragged, as she stared straight ahead, watching the snowflakes swirl beneath the dim glow of the streetlights. She had been humiliated before. She had felt anger before. But this was different. This was a deep, raw kind of rage, the kind that didn't fade with time, the kind that sat in your stomach, heavy and unmoving, poisoning everything around it. Her body ached from the push-ups. Her palms still burned from the icy pavement. But it wasn't the physical pain that made her shake, it was the helplessness. The powerlessness of knowing that if she had refused, if she had argued just a little too much, if she had made the wrong move, she might not be sitting in her car right now. She exhaled sharply, squeezing her eyes shut. How many times had this happened to people who didn't have the chance to drive away? Her fingers flexed against the wheel, trying to ground herself, trying to think. And then she remembered. Her dash cam. Her eyes flew open. For a second, she just sat there, stunned at her own realization. The whole time she had been thinking about how no one would believe her, about how it would be their word against hers, about how this would just become another story, one more injustice swept under the rug. But she had proof. She moved fast, her hands still unsteady as she reached toward the small black device mounted just beneath her rearview mirror. Her fingers fumbled against the controls, pressing the button to rewind the footage. The screen lit up with a faint blue glow, the night's events playing back in grainy black and white detail. There it was, the flashing lights, the officers' smug expressions. The moment they ordered her out of the car, her heart pounded as she watched it unfold. There was Porter's condescending smirk. There was Harrington's cold amusement. And then there she was, on the ground, her palms pressed against the ice, her arms shaking from the cold. The audio crackled. "Drop down and give me 20. Monica's stomach twisted as she listened to their voices again, heard the laughter, the taunts, the sheer joy they took in humiliating her. "Look at that, she listens. Maybe she's not as entitled as I thought." Her teeth clenched, her breath sharp. She had been trying so hard to push the moment out of her mind, to move past it, to pretend it hadn't happened. But there it was, undeniable, unforgivable. Her breathing turned shallow as she forced herself to watch the whole thing. She needed to feel it. She needed to remember exactly why she couldn't let this slide. By the time the footage ended, her hands had curled into fists. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed her phone and scrolled through her contacts. Her thumb hovered for a brief second over one name, Jonathan Carter. Then she pressed dial. The phone rang once, twice. Then a voice picked up, smooth and sharp as always. "Monica, you all right?" He already knew. Jonathan Carter didn't waste time with small talk. If she was calling him at nearly 2 in the morning, it wasn't for something minor. She swallowed, her throat tight. "I need you to look at something." There was a pause on the other end. Then his voice, quieter now but firm. "What happened?" Monica opened her mouth to answer, but the words stuck in her throat. Where did she even begin? She exhaled shakily, staring at the frozen windshield, her own reflection barely visible against the glass. "I got pulled over," she started, her voice stiff. "No reason. They made me get out, searched me, laughed in my face." Another pause. "Then what else?" She closed her eyes. The memory was still too fresh, too raw. Then she forced herself to say it. "They made me do push-ups on the pavement." The line went dead silent. Monica could almost hear the way Jonathan's mind was piecing it all together, the way his jaw probably tightened at the words. "You have it on video," he said, not a question, an answer. Monica nodded, even though he couldn't see her, every second of it. Jonathan exhaled sharply. She could picture him now, running a hand down his face, already shifting into strategy mode. "Send it to me. Now, don't post it, don't say anything. Let me handle it." She didn't need to be told twice. With stiff fingers, she uploaded the footage, watching the progress bar inch forward at an agonizingly slow pace. The second it finished, Jonathan's voice came through the speaker again. "Listen to me carefully," he said, his tone firm, serious. Monica sat up straighter. "Do not delete anything," he continued. "Not the original, not the backup. Nothing." "I won't," she said. "I'm calling in some favors first thing in the morning," Jonathan went on. "We're not just going after them, Monica." His voice dropped lower, heavier. "We're making sure this goes beyond a slap on the wrist." Monica's breath hitched. "You really think we can do this?" Jonathan didn't hesitate. "They messed with the wrong person." Monica closed her eyes, pressing the back of her hand against her forehead. She had power, she had influence, she had proof. And those officers, Porter and Harrington, they had no idea who they had just humiliated, but they were about to find out. Because this wasn't over. Monica barely slept. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind running through every second of the night before. The weight of it still clung to her, suffocating. The humiliation, the rage, the powerlessness. But beneath it all there was something else, a spark, a shift. For the first time since it happened, she wasn't just replaying the pain. She was thinking about what came next. By the time the first hints of sunlight broke through her bedroom window, she was already sitting on the edge of her bed, phone in hand, waiting. Then, at exactly 7:12 a.m., Jonathan called. She snatched up the phone before the second ring. "Tell me you have something." Jonathan didn't waste time. The video's already moving. His voice was clipped, controlled, but she could hear it, the sharp edge of determination beneath his words. "I sent it to the mayor's office, the police chief, and a few others who won't let this slide." Monica exhaled, pressing a hand against her forehead. It was happening. "How long do you think it'll take?" Jonathan let out a dry chuckle. "Oh, it's already out of their hands," she frowned. "What do you mean?" "You haven't checked your phone, have you?" Monica pulled the phone away from her ear, swiping to open her notifications. Her screen was flooded. Texts, missed calls, news alerts. Then she saw it. A video thumbnail, her video. The footage was already viral. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she clicked on the link. The screen lit up with the now all too familiar scene, flashing lights, cruel laughter, her body against the pavement. And the numbers, hundreds of thousands of views climbing by the second. A new kind of energy surged through her veins. Jonathan was still talking. "It caught fire faster than I expected," he admitted. "News stations are picking it up. People are pissed, Monica. This isn't just another case of police misconduct. This is blatant, caught-on-camera humiliation. This is public." Monica's breath came fast. It was bigger than she had even imagined. "They can't ignore this," Jonathan continued. "Which means they have to act," she finished for him. A beat of silence, then Jonathan's voice, firm and sure. "Exactly." By mid-morning, Monica sat in her restaurant office, laptop open, watching it all unfold. The footage was on every major news network. CNN, MSNBC, local Chicago stations, even headlines overseas. Chicago officers caught on dash cam forcing black woman to do push-ups in the snow. Police harassment video sparks outrage. Officers under investigation. Public demands justice after viral video of racial profiling. Monica clenched her jaw as she watched a news anchor play the footage on loop, pausing to analyze every word, every smirk, every second of power-tripping abuse. Her phone buzzed with more notifications, messages from friends, colleagues, and people she hadn't spoken to in years. This wasn't just a conversation anymore. This was a movement. Then came the email. Subject: Press conference 12:00 p.m. today from Office of the Chicago Police Chief. Monica stared at it, her pulse quickening. She clicked it open. Effective immediately. A press conference will be held at noon to address the misconduct of the officers involved in the recent viral footage. Her breath caught. That was fast. She glanced at the clock, 11:47 a.m. She didn't even think. She grabbed her laptop and opened the live stream. The screen flickered. The Chicago police chief, Robert Langley, stood at a podium, his face tight, his jaw clenched like he'd swallowed something bitter. The American flag hung behind him, along with the official police department banner. He cleared his throat, gripping the edges of the podium like he didn't want to be there. Monica leaned in, heart pounding. Langley adjusted the microphone. "Good afternoon," he started, his tone carefully measured. "Last night, footage surfaced of 2 of our officers engaging in behavior that does not reflect the values of this department." Monica almost scoffed. That's what they were calling it. Behavior. He continued. "We take these allegations seriously." Effective immediately, Sergeant Ryan Porter and Officer Lisa Harrington have been suspended pending a full internal investigation. Suspended. Monica's hands curled into fists. Not fired. Suspended, as if this was just a minor mistake. Langley's voice pressed on, his words carefully chosen, crafted to sound apologetic without actually taking responsibility. "This department remains committed to fairness, accountability, and trust with the community," he said, but Monica didn't believe a word of it. She watched as he sidestepped the real issue, never once acknowledging the racial profiling, never once addressing the abuse of power. Her stomach twisted. It wasn't enough, not even close. As soon as the press conference ended, her phone exploded with messages. Jonathan was the first to call. "Well, that was bullshit," he said, voice dripping with irritation. Monica exhaled. "Suspended?" "They're scrambling," Jonathan said. "They're trying to control the fallout, but they know damn well that won't be enough." Monica stared at her laptop screen, watching as news stations picked apart the announcement. Public not satisfied with suspension, calls for immediate termination of officers. She swallowed hard. This wasn't over. "Monica," Jonathan said, his voice softer now. "We made an impact. You did that." She nodded slowly, but something inside her still churned. "Then why doesn't it feel like enough?" she murmured. Jonathan sighed. "Because it's not." Monica closed her eyes, gripping the edge of her desk. For the first time since this started, she felt something other than anger. She felt responsibility. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every single person who had gone through this without a camera, without proof, without a lawyer. Jonathan's voice cut through her thoughts. "They want this to die down. They're betting on the public losing interest." Monica opened her eyes. "Then we don't let them," she said. Jonathan let out a short laugh. "I had a feeling you'd say that." Monica leaned back in her chair, staring at the city skyline through the window. This was only the beginning. They wanted her to move on. They wanted the world to forget. She wasn't going to let that happen. Monica sat in her restaurant office, staring out the window at the city she loved, the city that had nearly broken her. Nearly. But she wasn't broken. Outside, Chicago was alive with movement. The early evening glow of streetlights illuminated the roads, casting long shadows as pedestrians moved about, unaware of the storm Monica had just endured. Just days ago, she had been on her knees, pressing her palms into the freezing pavement, being laughed at like she wasn't even human. And now, those same officers, Porter and Harrington, were suspended, their names making headlines, their department scrambling for damage control. But that wasn't enough. Not even close. Porter and Harrington were just 2 faces in a system built to protect them. How many others had done the same thing, or worse, and had never been caught? How many had walked away from moments like hers, heads low, hands shaking, no camera, no lawyer, no justice? Monica's stomach twisted at the thought. That could have been her. That had been so many others, and that was when she knew. She couldn't let this be just another viral moment. She had a chance to do something bigger, to turn this from a single story into a movement. She wasn't just going to fight back. She was going to make sure no one else had to fight alone. Her phone buzzed, breaking her out of her thoughts. "Jonathan," she answered immediately. "Tell me you have something." "You're trending," he said. "No hello, no small talk. The footage is still all over the place. People are demanding action." The mayor's office is feeling the heat, and the police department, they're in damage control mode. Monica exhaled slowly, rubbing her temples. "And that means what?" Jonathan let out a low chuckle. "It means you've got leverage." She paused. "Go on." "They're going to want this to die down," he continued. "They're hoping people move on, get distracted by the next big thing. But if you push now, if you apply pressure while the public is still watching, you can make real change." Monica leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. "What do you have in mind?" Jonathan didn't even hesitate. "We go beyond just getting them fired. We push for policy changes, real accountability, independent investigations into misconduct, mandatory dash cams." A slow smile spread across Monica's face. She wasn't just going to fight for herself. She was going to make sure others never had to fight alone. That same night, Monica got to work. She reached out to civil rights organizations, legal experts, and community leaders. Within 48 hours, she had secured partnerships with 2 major advocacy groups and a tech startup specializing in car security. Together, they launched a campaign, Eyes on Justice, Dash Cams for Protection. The goal: to provide free or heavily discounted dash cams to black drivers across the country. For too long, people had been stopped, harassed, arrested, with no proof to back up their side of the story. A camera changed that. A camera could turn a lie into undeniable truth. A camera could save lives. Monica had seen firsthand what proof could do. It was the only reason she was still sitting here, free, while Porter and Harrington were out of a job. Now she wanted to give that power to others. But she wasn't stopping there. Monica used every resource she had, her business connections, the media attention, her growing influence, to push for deeper change. She met with lawmakers, city officials, activists. She demanded transparency in police misconduct cases. She pushed for mandatory dash cams in all police vehicles. She fought for stronger penalties against officers who abused their power. She spoke at community meetings, town halls, even on national news broadcasts. And slowly, people started listening. She wasn't just the woman in the viral video anymore. She was a leader, a fighter, a force, and she refused to be ignored. One evening, about a month after it all started, Monica found herself standing by the window of Hayes & Co. long after closing. The kitchen was dark, the dining room empty. The scent of roasted garlic and herbs still lingered in the air, remnants of a busy dinner rush. She wrapped her arms around herself, staring out at the streets she had walked 1,000 times before. This city had tried to humiliate her. Instead, she had turned it into her battleground. Her phone vibrated in her hand. A message from Jonathan. "Jonathan, we did it. The city council just approved funding for independent police oversight." "First steps, Monica, first of many." Monica let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The city was watching now, and change was happening. She looked at her reflection in the window, the same woman but different, stronger, unbreakable. She had started this fight for herself. But now, she was fighting for every person who had ever been silenced. Every black driver who had ever felt their stomach drop at the sight of flashing lights. Every person who had ever felt powerless. Monica had been silenced before. Never again. A slow, knowing smile tugged at the corner of her lips. This wasn't just about Porter and Harrington. It wasn't even just about her. This was about justice. For all of them. And this was just the beginning.